Welcome to our channel, Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. In a small American suburb, everything looked perfect. White fences, quiet nights, and neighbors who trusted each other. But behind one calm smile, a secret darker than anyone imagined was waiting to be uncovered. This is the story of how a peaceful street discovered the hidden killer living among them. The suburb looked peaceful under the morning sun. Houses stood side by side with white fences, trimmed lawns, and flower beds. The street was wide and clean, and birds sang from the trees. Children rode their bicycles while dogs barked from backyards. It was the kind of place where people felt safe. It was the kind of place where danger seemed far away. Ethan Carter lived in a house at the end of Willow Lane. He was in his 40s, with short brown hair and simple glasses. He had a small dog that he walked every morning and evening. Neighbors waved at him when he passed, and he always waved back. He kept his yard tidy and his porch clean. To everyone, he looked like the perfect neighbor. No one thought twice about him. One morning, a moving truck pulled up across the street from Ethan's house. Laura Bennett stepped out, brushing her hair from her face. She was in her early 30s, a single mother with a quiet strength in her eyes. Behind her came her daughter, Chloe, a 9-year-old girl with bright sneakers and a small pink backpack. Chloe looked around with wide eyes, taking in the quiet street. Laura hoped this new place would bring peace. Life in the city had been hard. Too much noise, too much worry, and too many bad memories. She wanted Chloe to grow up in a safer environment. This suburb, with its clean streets and kind neighbors, seemed like the right choice. Mrs. Turner, an older woman who loved gardening, came by first. She brought a small plate of cookies and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Laura smiled warmly and thanked her. Then came Daniel Brooks, a man in his late 30s who worked as a night shift security guard. He offered to help carry heavy boxes inside. He had a friendly smile and steady hands. Laura felt grateful for his kindness. Ethan also appeared, carrying a small basket tied with string. Inside were 2 types of cookies. He smiled politely and said, "Welcome to the neighborhood." He told Laura which day the garbage was collected and where the nearest grocery store was. His tone was calm, polite, and helpful. Laura thought he was being generous, though she noticed his eyes lingered on Chloe longer than she liked. Still, she brushed the thought aside. He was probably just being nice. The afternoon was filled with unpacking. Chloe made a fort out of empty boxes in the living room, pretending it was a castle. Laura laughed and took a picture of her. She felt lighter, as if this move was the right step toward a better life. Outside, the street stayed calm. A teenager rode a skateboard down the sidewalk. A dog barked happily at the sound of children playing. Everything seemed so normal. As evening came, Laura and Chloe decided to take a walk to the park nearby. The path was lined with tall trees, and the air smelled fresh. They passed the Green family's house. Their teenage daughter, Olivia, waved and smiled at Chloe, saying she liked her shoes. Chloe smiled shyly and squeezed her mother's hand. Laura felt good seeing friendly neighbors. At the park, Chloe tried the swings and laughed as she went higher and higher. Laura sat on a bench and watched other families enjoying the evening. A father pushed a stroller, a cyclist rang his bell, and a group of kids played tag. It felt safe. It felt like a place where she and Chloe could finally breathe. On the way back, Laura noticed a flyer taped to a streetlight. It had a picture of a small tan dog and a phone number. The words, "Missing since Tuesday night," were written in bold letters. Chloe asked, "Do you think the dog will come home?" Laura smiled and said, "Yes, maybe. Dogs are smart. They often find their way back." She said it calmly, but in her mind, the word night stayed. It felt strange that a dog would vanish in such a safe neighborhood. When they reached home, Daniel waved from his porch. "Everything settling in?" he asked. Laura nodded and said yes. He told her that the neighborhood had a small watch group that shared updates through text messages. Nothing serious ever happened, he explained, but people like to stay aware. Laura thought it was a good idea and promised to join. Dinner was simple that night, pasta and bread. Laura and Chloe ate at the small kitchen table, the boxes still stacked around them. Through the window, Laura saw Ethan walking his dog again. His steps were steady and he carried himself with calmness. He looked like any other neighbor, but something about him made her uneasy. She told herself not to judge. First impressions could be misleading. After dinner, Chloe played with her toys while Laura organized the living room. She placed a framed picture of Chloe on the mantel. It showed her smiling at the beach, her hair blowing in the wind. Laura touched the frame gently and whispered to herself, "This is a new start." As night fell, the street grew quiet. Porch lights glowed softly. Laura locked the front door and checked the windows. She felt safer knowing she had moved here, but there was still a small worry deep inside her. She could not explain it. It was like a whisper she tried to ignore. Ethan sat in his own house, writing in a small notebook. He had done this for years. He wrote down times, names, and habits of the neighbors. He noted when lights went off, when children walked home, and when people left for work. His writing was neat and careful. He closed the book, placed it in a drawer, and turned off the lamp. The suburb slept in peace, but Ethan stayed awake, listening to the silence. The days in the suburb moved slowly, filled with sunshine, friendly greetings, and the sound of sprinklers. Laura tried to settle into her new home. She unpacked the last of her boxes, arranged furniture, and began to feel the place turning into a home. Chloe grew more comfortable, too. She learned which houses had children her age and which yards had dogs she liked to pet. Laura believed, at least for the first few weeks, that she had made the best decision of her life. But soon, small things began to trouble her. One morning, as she walked Chloe to school, she noticed another flyer pinned to a tree. It was about the same missing dog. Days had passed, and the family was still searching. The sight of the flyer gave her a strange feeling. She thought about how odd it was for a pet to vanish without any trace in such a quiet suburb. Chloe asked again about the dog, and Laura smiled, telling her everything would be fine. But inside, she could not shake the thought. That evening, as Laura carried groceries inside, she looked across the street. Ethan was standing on his porch, staring down the street as if waiting for something. He wore a calm expression, but his eyes seemed sharp, almost too focused. When he noticed Laura watching, he smiled and raised his hand. She waved back politely, but a chill crept up her spine. She quickly stepped inside, telling herself she was being silly. Daniel Brooks, the night shift guard, also began to notice strange things. One late evening, when he came home after work, he heard a noise near his garage. It was a scraping sound, like metal on metal. He pointed his flashlight in the direction of the noise, but there was nothing there. The street was empty, only quiet houses and shadows. He shook his head, thinking he was just tired. But when he checked his garage door, he noticed a small scratch near the lock. A few nights later, Daniel thought he saw a figure moving at the end of the street. The person was standing near the old vacant house that was for sale. The house had been empty for months, but Daniel had noticed lights flicker inside from time to time. When he tried to look closer, the figure vanished into the darkness. Daniel felt uneasy but told himself he was imagining things. After all, he had worked a long shift, and exhaustion could play tricks on the mind. Meanwhile, Laura started to notice Ethan's presence more and more. He always seemed to be outside at the same time she was. If she was watering the plants, he would suddenly appear on his porch. If she walked Chloe to school, she would see him walking his dog in the same direction. He never did anything wrong, but his constant presence felt strange. One Saturday afternoon, Laura invited Chloe to the park again. As they walked past Ethan's house, he was trimming his hedge. He smiled and said, "Good afternoon." Chloe waved, but Laura only gave a small nod. She tried not to let her discomfort show. At the park, she sat on a bench while Chloe played on the swings. Her eyes kept drifting back to the street behind her, where she thought she saw a man standing near a tree. When she looked again, the figure was gone. That night, Chloe whispered to her mother that she saw someone standing in their backyard. Laura froze, asking what she meant. Chloe said she woke up thirsty, went to get water, and saw a shadow through the window. Laura comforted her daughter, telling her it was just the wind or maybe a neighbor passing by. But when Chloe asked if they could sleep with the light on, Laura agreed. The next morning, Laura told Daniel about Chloe's story. Daniel frowned and said, "Maybe it's nothing, but I'll keep an eye out." He didn't want to worry her. but he had also begun to feel that something was not right. The rest of the week passed with a heavy feeling. The suburb still looked perfect from the outside, but whispers spread among neighbors. Some said it was outsiders causing trouble. Others thought it was kids playing pranks. But Laura and Daniel felt the danger was closer than anyone wanted to believe. Ethan, on the other hand, carried himself as if nothing was wrong. He helped Mrs. Turner with her groceries, waved at children, and watered his plants with a calm smile. But when he was inside his house, alone, he wrote in his notebook. He recorded the time when Chloe walked to school, when Laura returned from the store, and when Daniel left for work. His notes grew longer every day. Late one night, Laura woke to a noise. It was faint, like a creak outside her window. She sat up in bed, heart pounding. Slowly, she walked to the window and looked out. The street was empty, glowing softly under the streetlights. She told herself it was just the house settling or a branch swaying in the wind. Still, she locked her window and checked Chloe's room before going back to bed. Ethan sat awake across the street, his curtains drawn, his notebook open. He watched the quiet suburb, waiting for the right moment. The weekend came with a calm sky and soft wind. Families washed cars in their driveways, children played in the yards, and the smell of barbecue drifted from one corner of the street. Laura tried to relax. She made pancakes for Chloe, and together they planned to spend the evening watching a movie. It felt like a normal Saturday, the kind she wanted for her daughter. But by evening, everything changed. Olivia Green, the teenage daughter of the Green family, left her house around 6. She told her parents she was going to visit a friend who lived a few blocks away. She carried her phone and wore her backpack. She promised to be back before dark. Her parents smiled and told her to be careful, but they were not worried. The suburb was safe. Everyone knew each other. Nothing bad was supposed to happen here. When the sun dipped behind the houses, Olivia had not returned. At first, her parents thought she had lost track of time. They called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Her father walked down the street to check if she was nearby, but there was no sign of her. By 8 o'clock, panic had set in. Her mother began calling neighbors, asking if anyone had seen her. Nobody had. Laura heard the worry outside and stepped out to ask what was happening. When she learned Olivia was missing, her stomach turned cold. Chloe was playing with her dolls, and Laura pulled her close, holding her a little tighter than before. She told Chloe to stay inside as she joined the search party. Neighbors came out with flashlights. Daniel Brooks, still in his work uniform, drove slowly through the streets, shining his headlights into alleys and side paths. Parents called Olivia's name, their voices echoing in the quiet night. Mrs. Turner cried softly, holding her arms close to her chest. Everyone worked together, but the fear grew heavier with each passing minute. Ethan also joined the search. He walked calmly among the neighbors, holding his flashlight and offering suggestions. He said maybe Olivia had gone to the park, or maybe she had taken a shortcut through the back path. His voice was steady and reassuring, and people listened. Laura noticed how calm he looked, almost too calm, but she pushed the thought aside. They had bigger worries now. By midnight, police cars arrived. Blue and red lights flashed across the quiet houses. Officers knocked on doors, asked questions, and searched nearby areas. They brought in dogs to track scents, but the trail seemed to vanish. It was as if Olivia had disappeared into thin air. The suburb, once so full of laughter, now felt tense and silent. Parents held their children close. Curtains stayed closed. The night no longer felt safe. Laura barely slept. She lay awake, listening to every creak of the house. Chloe tossed and turned, finally falling asleep with the light still on. Laura checked the locks twice and kept a chair pressed against the front door. Her mind replayed the evening over and over. How could a girl just vanish from a place like this? The next morning, news spread quickly. Flyers with Olivia's picture were printed and handed out. Her smiling face stared from every pole and tree. Volunteers walked the streets, calling her name. Police asked neighbors for security camera footage, but nothing useful was found. Laura stood with other mothers near the park. She listened as they whispered to each other. Some said maybe Olivia had run away. Others believed a stranger had taken her. But Laura felt a chill inside her heart. Something told her the danger was closer than they thought. She glanced at Ethan, who stood a few feet away, talking to a police officer. His answers were clear and polite. He explained that he had been walking his dog at the time. His voice never shook, his eyes never looked worried. Most people saw him as a good man, willing to help. But Laura noticed how quickly he gave his answers as if he had rehearsed them. Daniel also felt uneasy. He told Laura later that Ethan's calmness didn't sit right with him. "I've seen nervous people, scared people," Daniel said. "He's neither. It's like he's just watching." The Greens stayed in their house, refusing to let go of hope. Olivia's mother cried at the window while her father spoke with detectives. The entire street felt the weight of their grief. That evening, Laura walked Chloe to school supplies store nearby, trying to distract her from the fear. On their way back, she saw Ethan again standing on his porch with his notebook in hand. He smiled at her and said hello, but Laura felt her skin prickle. She hurried Chloe inside and locked the door. At night, the suburb was no longer quiet. Sirens sounded in the distance. Officers searched with flashlights and helicopters hovered overhead. But despite the efforts, Olivia was still missing. The calm suburb had turned into a place of whispers, suspicion, and fear. Inside his house, Ethan closed his notebook and placed it back in the drawer. His dog slept at his feet, unaware of the darkness that lingered in its owner's heart. Ethan leaned back in his chair and smiled faintly. To the world, he was still the quiet neighbor. To himself, he was something else entirely. The suburb slept uneasily, unaware of how close the danger truly was. The disappearance of Olivia Green changed the entire neighborhood. Willow Lane, once known for calm mornings and safe evenings, now carried a heavy silence. Families who once left their doors unlocked began to check and recheck every lock before bed. Parents who once let children play freely outside now kept them close, their eyes scanning the street for anything unusual. The suburb looked the same, but the feeling had shifted. Laura felt it every day. She watched Chloe more carefully than ever. When her daughter played in the yard, she stayed near the window, eyes fixed on her every move. At night, she kept the lights on in the hallway and locked every door twice. She tried to act calm for Chloe's sake, but the fear pressed on her chest like a weight she could not lift. One evening, Laura and Chloe were in the kitchen when Chloe whispered that she had seen someone in their backyard again. Laura froze. She went to the window and looked out. The yard was empty, lit by the weak glow of the porch light. Still, her heart pounded. She asked Chloe if she was sure. Chloe nodded quickly, her small eyes wide with fear. Laura hugged her and said it must have been her imagination, but deep down, she felt the same unease. The Green family barely left their house. Olivia's mother sat by the window all day, waiting for news, while her father spoke to detectives who came and went. Flyers covered every post in the suburb, and volunteers searched the nearby woods and fields. But there were no answers. Olivia had simply vanished. Daniel Brooks grew restless. He worked long nights, and when he returned home, the street felt darker than before. One night, as he parked his car, he heard footsteps behind him. He spun around, shining his flashlight, but the street was empty. Another time, he found his garage door open, though he was certain he had closed it. The scratch near the lock had grown deeper, as if someone had tried again to force it. Daniel began keeping a baseball bat by his bed, unwilling to take chances. Rumors spread quietly. Some neighbors said it had to be a stranger passing through. Others whispered that maybe Olivia had run away. But there were those who suspected something worse, something closer. A few noticed Ethan's calmness during the search. They thought it was strange that he never looked nervous, never seemed shaken. But he was always polite, always ready to help, and no one dared to say anything out loud. Laura tried not to look at him too much, but she could not avoid it. Every time she stepped outside, Ethan seemed to be there. If she watered her plants, he appeared on his porch. If she took Chloe for a walk, he was walking his dog at the same time. His smile was polite, but something in his eyes made her uneasy. She tried to tell herself she was only being paranoid, that she was letting fear control her thoughts. Yet the feeling did not go away. One night, as Laura prepared Chloe for bed, she heard a faint sound outside. It was like someone moving near the fence. She turned off the light and looked out the window. At first, she saw nothing, but then she caught a glimpse of a figure slipping into the shadows near Ethan's yard. Her heart raced. She wanted to call Daniel, but she told herself she might be mistaken. She closed the curtains tightly and stayed awake long after Chloe had fallen asleep. Detectives continued their work, knocking on doors, questioning families, and checking every corner of the suburb. They spoke to Ethan, too, asking about his routine. He answered calmly, saying he had been home most nights, except when walking his dog. His words were smooth, steady, and without hesitation. Detective Carla Monroe, who had taken charge of the case, listened carefully. Something about his answers struck her as too perfect, but without evidence, she could not act. The atmosphere in the suburb grew heavier each day. Families avoided eye contact, conversations grew shorter, and children stopped riding their bicycles down the street. Even the park, once full of laughter, stood empty in the evenings. The silence felt thick, as if everyone was holding their breath. Laura often thought about leaving, about packing her things and finding another place. But she knew moving again would be hard, and she wanted stability for Chloe. Still, the thought lingered at the back of her mind. She told herself if things got worse, she would not hesitate. Daniel, meanwhile, decided to keep watch at night. He stayed up late, sitting on his porch with a flashlight in his lap. He told himself he was protecting the street, but part of him also wanted answers. One night, just after midnight, he thought he saw movement near Ethan's shed. He narrowed his eyes, but before he could step closer, the figure vanished into the dark. He wondered if it was Ethan himself, but he had no proof. He made a note to mention it to Detective Monroe. The suburb continued to look perfect from the outside. White fences, trimmed lawns, and neat houses. But beneath the surface, fear crept into every home. The families who once trusted each other now looked over their shoulders. Everyone waited for news about Olivia, but none came. Ethan sat in his living room, his notebook open once again. He wrote carefully, noting when Laura put Chloe to bed, when Daniel returned from work, and when the Greens turned off their lights. His notes were detailed, exact, and organized. When he finished, he closed the book and placed it neatly back in the drawer. Then he smiled faintly and turned off the light. The suburb slept uneasily, the silence broken only by the hum of streetlights and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. Detective Carla Monroe returned to Willow Lane early one morning. She wore a plain suit, her hair tied neatly back, and her eyes sharp with focus. She walked slowly down the street, looking at the houses, the fences, and even the small details people often ignored. She was not like the other officers who had come before. She had patience, and she believed answers were always hidden in the small things. She knocked on several doors, asking questions about Olivia's disappearance. Most neighbors repeated the same stories. They had seen nothing unusual. They had heard no cries for help. The suburb was always quiet, and that was why they had chosen to live there. Carla listened carefully, writing notes in her small book. When she spoke with Ethan, she noticed something different. He answered every question too quickly. His words were smooth, almost like he had rehearsed them. He explained that he had been home most nights except when walking his dog. He said he had helped with the search and had nothing else to offer. His expression never changed, calm and polite. But Carla's instincts told her there was more beneath the surface. Later that day, Daniel approached her. He told her about the scratches on his garage door and the strange figure he had seen near Ethan's shed. Carla did not dismiss his words. She asked him to describe what he had noticed, and she wrote everything down carefully. She told Daniel to stay alert and to call her if anything happened again. That evening, Carla decided to take a closer look at Ethan's property. She walked past slowly, pretending to be casual, but her eyes studied the small details. His shed was locked with a heavy padlock, but the paint near the door looked worn, as if it had been opened and closed many times. She also noticed a faint trail in the grass behind the shed, leading toward the woods. With a warrant in hand the next day, officers searched Ethan's property. Inside the shed, they found things that made the neighbors shiver when they heard about them later. There were ropes, gloves, and tools that seemed out of place for simple gardening. More disturbing was the discovery of a journal. Its pages were filled with neat handwriting, recording the routines of nearly every family in the suburb. Times when lights went off, when children played outside, when people left for work, all written down with disturbing precision. Carla held the notebook in her hands, her expression steady but her mind alert. This was not the behavior of a normal neighbor. She told the officers to take everything into evidence. Ethan, however, stayed calm. When asked about the items, he said he liked to write as a hobby, and the tools were for repairs. His voice never shook, and his face never lost its polite smile. The community reacted with shock. Neighbors who had once trusted Ethan now whispered behind closed doors. Some said it was a misunderstanding. Others said it explained too much. Laura felt her fear deepen. She thought about the times she had seen Ethan watching from his porch, about the way his eyes lingered on Chloe, and about the way he always seemed to appear at the right moment. That night, Laura barely slept. She checked every window and kept Chloe close to her side. She wanted to believe the police would take care of everything, but she also knew that sometimes the truth took time to come out, and time, she feared, was dangerous. Daniel stayed up on his porch again, determined not to let anything happen without him noticing. He gripped his flashlight tightly and scanned the street every few minutes. Around midnight, he thought he saw Ethan's curtains move. A faint shadow shifted inside the house. Daniel narrowed his eyes, but nothing else happened. He wondered if Ethan knew he was being watched. Carla continued her investigation the next day. She spoke with more neighbors, piecing together small details. She began to see a pattern in the reports of noises, missing pets, and shadows near the yards. They all seemed to point back to the same area of the street, Ethan's side. Still, without direct proof, she could not act too quickly. She told Laura and Daniel to stay cautious, reminding them that sometimes people hide their true selves behind the most ordinary masks. The suburb grew quieter. Families avoided eye contact when passing one another. Parents kept their children indoors, and even the park remained empty. The silence carried fear, heavy and unspoken. Inside his house, Ethan sat in his chair, his dog curled at his feet. He watched through the gap in his curtains as neighbors walked past quickly, avoiding his eyes. He smiled faintly, his hand resting on the closed drawer where his notebook had once been. Though it was gone, taken by the police, he remembered every word he had written. The days after the discovery of Ethan's journal were filled with tension. Police cars often drove through the suburb, their slow patrols reminding everyone that danger had lived close for far too long. Neighbors whispered when they saw Ethan outside. Some avoided looking at him at all. Others stared with suspicion, waiting for the police to return and take him away. Ethan, however, remained calm. He walked his dog as usual, watered his plants, and greeted people with the same polite smile. He acted as if nothing had changed, as if the shed, the tools, and the disturbing notebook were simply misunderstandings. His calmness unsettled everyone, especially Laura. One evening, Laura was making dinner when Chloe asked if she could play outside for a while. Laura hesitated but agreed, telling her to stay in the yard. She watched from the kitchen window as Chloe ran in circles with her jump rope. Then she noticed Ethan standing on his porch. He was watching, his arms folded, his eyes fixed on Chloe. When he saw Laura looking, he lifted his hand and smiled. Laura quickly called Chloe inside, her heart beating fast. That same night, Daniel sat on his porch with his flashlight as he often did. The air was cool and the street was quiet. Around 11, he noticed Ethan standing at the edge of his yard, talking to Chloe. Daniel jumped up and called out, "Hey, what's going on?" Laura rushed outside at the same moment, pulling Chloe away. Ethan calmly explained that he had only been showing Chloe something interesting in his yard. His voice was smooth, but Laura felt sick at the thought of how close he had been to her daughter. Detective Carla Monroe was nearby, conducting a late-night check. When she saw the scene, she stepped forward and asked Ethan to stay where he was. His smile slipped for the first time. He looked at her with cold eyes before trying to walk away. Carla ordered him to stop, but Ethan suddenly broke into a run. The quiet street erupted into chaos. Officers who had been stationed nearby chased after him. Daniel blocked one path with his car, forcing Ethan to turn back. He sprinted across lawns, knocking over trash bins, but the police were faster. They tackled him near the vacant house at the end of the street. Ethan struggled, his face twisted with anger, but he was overpowered and handcuffed. Neighbors came out of their houses, watching in shock. The polite man they had trusted for years was no longer smiling. His calm mask was gone, replaced by fury and desperation. The truth was revealed in those moments. Ethan had been hiding his true self all along, waiting for chances to act on his dark plans. Laura held Chloe close as she watched the arrest. Tears filled her eyes, partly from fear and partly from relief. Daniel stood nearby, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. He knew they had stopped something terrible from happening, but the thought of how close it had come shook him deeply. Carla remained steady, her eyes fixed on Ethan. She read him his rights and ordered the officers to take him away. Ethan did not resist anymore. He lowered his head and said nothing. The street was filled with flashing red and blue lights, the sound of radios, and the heavy silence of neighbors who realized the danger had been inside their own community all along. Later, as the police cars drove away with Ethan in the back seat, Laura sat with Chloe in her arms. She whispered that everything would be okay now, though her voice trembled. Daniel came over and told her she had done the right thing by acting fast. Carla assured them that the evidence collected, along with Ethan's behavior, would make sure he would not return. The suburb remained quiet after the commotion faded, but it was a different kind of quiet now. The calm surface of Willow Lane had been shattered, and its people knew it would never be the same. Inside her home, Laura sat at the kitchen table, staring at the closed curtains. She thought about the times Ethan had smiled at her, the times he had seemed so normal. She realized how dangerous appearances could be, how evil could hide behind the most ordinary face. She promised herself she would always trust her instincts from now on. Chloe slept in her room, clutching her toy bear, unaware of how close she had come to danger. Daniel returned to his porch, sitting in silence with the weight of the night heavy on his shoulders. Carla drove away, already preparing her report, but she knew the people of Willow Lane would carry this night in their memories forever. Ethan Carter, the hidden killer of the quiet suburb, was finally unmasked, but the fear he had planted in the hearts of his neighbors would not disappear so easily. The nights after Ethan's arrest were strangely quiet. Willow Lane looked the same as always, with trimmed lawns, white fences, and soft porch lights, but the air felt different. People walked slower, spoke in softer tones, and glanced over their shoulders more often. The illusion of safety had been broken, and even though the police had taken Ethan away, the fear he left behind remained. Laura sat on her porch one morning, sipping coffee while Chloe played with chalk on the driveway. The sun was warm and birds sang, but she could not shake the heaviness in her chest. She thought about how close she had come to losing her daughter. The thought made her grip the mug tighter. She had trusted the quiet suburb, but now she knew better. Evil could hide anywhere, even behind the smile of a neighbor. Daniel often checked on Laura and Chloe, stopping by to see if they needed anything. He seemed restless, pacing his porch at night as if he was still keeping guard. He told Laura he sometimes dreamed of that night, the moment Ethan had tried to run, the look on his face when the mask dropped. Daniel said he would never forget it. Detective Carla Monroe came back a few days later to update the neighbors. She told them the evidence found in Ethan's shed and journal was enough to keep him locked away for a long time. She explained that more investigations were underway and other unsolved cases in nearby towns might be connected to him. The news made people shiver. They realized the quiet man they had trusted had been far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Green family did not attend the meeting. Their grief was still too deep. Olivia's parents stayed inside most days, curtains drawn, their faces pale and tired. The memory of their daughter's disappearance hung over the entire community like a shadow. Even though Ethan was gone, the pain of not knowing where Olivia was or what had happened to her would not heal quickly. Laura walked Chloe to school again for the first time since Ethan's arrest. She held her daughter's hand tightly, scanning the street as they went. She noticed how other parents walked closer to their children too, no longer letting them run ahead. The school gate felt like a safe place, but Laura's heart did not calm until Chloe was inside. On her way home, she passed Ethan's house. The windows were dark, the porch empty, but just looking at it made her skin prickle. She wondered how many nights he had stood there, watching. Neighbors slowly began to return to their routines, but nothing felt normal. The park remained half empty, the laughter of children softer than before. People greeted one another, but there was a distance in their eyes. Trust had been broken, and it would take time to rebuild. One evening, Laura sat with Daniel on her porch. They watched the sun sink behind the roofs, painting the sky with orange light. Chloe drew pictures with chalk near their feet, her voice cheerful as she hummed a tune. For a moment, things felt peaceful. Daniel said, "We did the right thing that night. You listened to your instincts, and that saved her." Laura nodded but did not smile. She knew the scars of fear would remain for a long time. Inside her house later that night, Laura checked the locks again. She stood at Chloe's bedroom door, watching her sleep peacefully with her toy bear clutched tight. A soft sigh left her lips as she whispered, "You're safe now." But even as she said it, she knew she would never let her guard down again. Detective Monroe finished her reports and moved on to another case. But she thought often of Willow Lane. She knew the people here had learned a hard lesson, that danger does not always look dangerous. Sometimes it wears the mask of a friendly neighbor, blending in until it is too late. Weeks passed, and the suburb began to heal, though slowly. New families came to look at houses, unaware of the dark history hidden behind the quiet smiles of the street. The people who had lived through it remembered, though. They would never forget. Laura decided not to move again. She wanted stability for Chloe, and she wanted to prove to herself that they could overcome the fear. But she changed in small ways. She joined the neighborhood watch group, learned the names of every person on the street, and made sure she always trusted her instincts. Daniel stayed a close friend, someone she could rely on when the nights felt too long. The suburb looked peaceful again from the outside. Children's laughter returned, flowers bloomed in the gardens, and the hum of lawnmowers filled the air. But underneath it all, people carried the memory of what had happened. They understood now that safety could be fragile, and that even in the calmest streets, shadows could hide. Ethan Carter was gone, locked away where he could no longer harm anyone. But the truth he revealed lingered, reminding everyone that the real danger is not always a stranger in the dark. Sometimes it is the neighbor who smiles and waves every morning, and so the suburb lived on, quieter, more careful, and forever changed. You've just seen another chilling story from the world of true crime, but there are many more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe to Crime Loom, and join us as we unravel more heists, mysteries, and untold legends. Don't miss what's coming next, because in the world of crime, the truth is always stranger than fiction.